So I wanted to take a minute and talk about the DBL suspension that I actually have on this F450 Super Single conversion. It's running a 41-inch tire and it's a 2-inch lift. So this is a different fender on the front. I did cut the fender and cut into the firewall to give clearance. Now I do still maintain full factory up travel. And one of the things I just wanted to point out, and you have a lot of competitors out there as far as kits go, and we're talking, you know, Carly and BDS and all of these different kind of like off-road capable kits for F250s, F350s, that have progressive rate springs, and they're supposed to ride better, be smoother, things like that. So with this, I have a camper on here. It's an F450. I tow a truck to the desert for off-road. Everything with this truck is slow. It's a motorhome. So you're crawling, and for the most part, you need articulation. I don't need extensive high rates of speed with the travels, like as far as like bypasses or adjustable compressions and things like that, because the camper and the bed are going to articulate and move so much if you start to drive these things super fast. They do move independent. I do have a pad underneath the camper on the bed of the, or underneath the camper between the bed, and then obviously the springs that hold in the camper, they do allow for articulation, and the bed does move. But overall, this truck is set up for street driving, towing, and slow off-roading. If I need to recover a vehicle, if I need to take my trailer out to get my Raptor, or if I'm just doing some overlanding up in the mountains or in the desert, crawling over anything, or fire roads, is completely fine. I mean, you can drive 40-50 miles an hour on any kind of service road for sure. Now, if it's getting real rough, I do slow down. But the reason I'm kind of talking about that is because overall, this is a very basic suspension setup. I actually have a spacer on the front, and it's just a 2-inch or 2.0 non-reservoir front shock. Now, the reason I still have the factory front coil is because of the gap between the springs. This still allows for full articulation and up travel from factory, and I do not have a bump stop extension. If you go to a progressive rate coil from Carly, you have to run a 2-inch spacer, so you lose 2 inches of up travel, and that's how they say, oh well, you can run a 38, you can run a 39. That's because they limit the up travel on the vehicle. So you'll raise it 4 inches, but you're not gaining travel, you're increasing the height of the vehicle and then not allowing for up travel. So this has the maximum amount of up travel slash articulation while lifting the vehicle as little as possible. So in the front, it is a spacer, but because the factory coil has such a large gap between it, it can still go completely up. If you look at a progressive rate coil, they normally have 3 or 4 very tight coils at the top and the bottom, and not a large gap between the other ones. Now, they do ride smoother in a lot of cases, but because I'm rolling around with a camper on here, an auxiliary tank, and I weigh 14,000 pounds, it's not that rough and not that big of a deal to go to a progressive rate coil. If you go to, say, a Carly progressive rate coil, technically you've changed the tow capability and the weight rating as far as load capacity, because they're making the springs softer to ride better and off-road better. But as far as nose diving under heavy braking with a load, there are some disadvantages to that. Now, in the back, I don't even have an airbag set up, and I do still tow with this truck. What I did was I put the camper on it, and then I took it to Atlas Leafs, and then I had a custom leaf pack made so that the truck would be level with the camper on the truck. Now, I do still have an overload spring, which you could see the camper is on the truck right now, and I'm not on the overload. It goes onto the overload if I hit a big dip that I go through, or I have the trailer with my truck connected to the back. But this allows for much more travel in the back. It did improve the ride quality. It's much smoother than the factory Leafs. So I'm happy with the rear leaf pack, and overall really with the whole suspension package in general. Now I have coilover bypasses, things like that on my pre-runner, and I could go to a coilover on this. I could go to a 2.5 or a 3.0 smooth body shock with high and low speed compression, all that stuff, and maybe it would improve the ride somewhat, but I don't necessarily know that it's worth the additional money when, for the most part, you go slow in these. So that's kind of why I haven't upgraded the shocks or tried to really mess with it. This is a pretty basic suspension setup. These wheels and tires bolt on. There's no modification to the rear axle, and it's done great. I have 75,000 miles on this truck, and I installed the kit at about 3,500 miles. And this is the second set of Continental MPT 81s that I have had on the truck. So yeah, overall I think it's a very basic kit. It's nothing to rant or rave about. It's definitely not a, you know, pre-runner off-road high-speed kit. It's a motorhome. So that's just kind of an overview of the DBL kit. And then obviously I have an Atlas rear leaf pack, which isn't part of the kit. So yeah, and then I'll do another video of kind of the hitch setup with an extension. I have a 40-gallon auxiliary tank and a couple of other things on the vehicle that I'll go over here in a minute.